Hey everybody, welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host Christian. Thank you very much for joining me on this week's podcast. We have quite a big one for you guys this week, so let's just get right into it. But of course, before we get to this week's news items, let's talk about the news items that came out last week after the podcast went up. The first one is the Croods 2 has been canceled by DreamWorks Animation. Now for fans looking forward to the sequel, like I was for the 2013 animated film The Croods, are now in for some disappointment because it has been announced that DreamWorks Animation has, of course, again, canceled the project. Variety reported that despite hiring new writers in August and the film having a release date for December 22nd next year, the studio has decided to cancel the project. The cancellation was partly due to the fact that DreamWorks Animation moved studios from 20th Century Fox over to Universal Pictures, but the other reason is that the film was having some problems before the switch even happened. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the first film, The Croods was a prehistoric set family comedy that had a pretty good voice cast. That had Nicolas Cage, Emma Stone, Ryan Reynolds, and Catherine Keener, and the film was a pretty sizable hit and was actually really surprisingly good. I didn't really think about the film too much before it came out, and then I saw the film and it was really good. It was really funny. There was a lot of great moments in there. So I highly recommend, if you haven't seen The Croods, by the way, I highly recommend you guys watch it if you haven't. So I'm a little disappointed that the film is no longer coming out. But right now, DreamWorks Animation just apparently there was a lot of problems with the film. It was really tough not to crack, I guess. I don't know. It's obviously since they hire new writers, but there's the thing. So right now, DreamWorks Animation only has 2 films coming out next year, which is The Boss Baby and the Captain Underpants film. And in 2018, they have the 3rd film of How to Train Your Dragon. So they're not, they have stuff going on, but The Croods was something that I was really looking forward to. So we'll see what happens with that. Finally, the last news item that came out last week after the podcast went up, a writer has been found for the Harley Quinn / Birds of Prey spin-off film. Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, of course, became pretty much a pop culture icon, or has become a pop culture icon at this point, and is one of the standouts of the very divisive Suicide Squad that came out earlier this year. However, it did come a little of a surprise that that Warner Bros. And DC Entertainment decided to do essentially a Suicide Squad spin-off following Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. Although, again, she was one of the better things in the film and stuff like that. So it does not make sense, put it that way. Now the film has found a writer, a pretty new writer, in Christina Hudson. Now Hudson is pretty much, again, she's an up-and-coming name in Hollywood, and one that's had scripts on the prestigious Hollywood Blacklist, which is essentially a list of the best scripts in Hollywood that don't have producers or directors or aren't getting made. So that's kind of what the Blacklist is. And every once in a while, you'll probably read a report like that and be like, "Oh, this script's on the Blacklist." That's essentially what they mean. So it was one of the best scripts that doesn't have a producer or director or even a studio attached. Prisoners, which is something we talk about a lot on the podcast, the Jake Gyllenhaal, Hugh Jackman film, that script was on the Blacklist for a while before it finally got made. And of course, there's other films along the way as well. So anyway, she has signed on to do the film, which is a pretty big step for that movie. She does have one film currently in theaters called Shut In, the Naomi Watts thriller film that's getting some, let's say, tepid reviews. Let's just say tepid reviews. Her next scripted film is an erotic thriller. I almost said exotic. Erotic thriller called Unforgettable with Rosario Dawson and Katherine Heigl. Her other scripts include a female-centric sci-fi film called The Eden Project for Sony Pictures, a reboot of The Fugitive, and an adaptation of the Japanese crime novel Out for a possible TV series over at AMC. She's also doing a female-centric action epic at Fox, and she wrote the Transformers spin-off film for Bumblebee. She's a very, very busy person, and obviously someone they were probably eventually going to end up talking about for a while. So when it comes to the actual project, the Harley Quinn / Birds of Prey film, It's still in the early stages, but Robbie, of course, will come back to star. She's also producing the film with her production company, Lucky Chap. And when it comes to the Birds of Prey aspect of it, it should be interesting to see what group they follow. The concept and the idea of the Birds of Prey was introduced with Black Canary and Oracle, Oracle is a name for Barbara Gordon / Batgirl. She became Oracle because of the Joker, because he shot her and she lost the ability to. She became she was bound to a wheelchair. That's what I'm trying to say, and so she became Oracle. So other members that have become part of the Birds of Prey, because they have been bringing in more characters, the female ones. There have been men that have been associated with the Birds of Prey, but the female characters include the Huntress, Poison Ivy, Lady Blackhawk, and of course fellow Suicide Squad member Katana, which of course she was introduced in Suicide Squad, so it makes sense that they would bring her in and make her a part of the film, because fans already kind of pretty much already know her. So we don't really know too much about the film just yet, other than it will follow, of course, Harley Quinn and whatever members of the Birds of Prey. So the film doesn't have a production date yet. It's still obviously in the early stages, but we'll see what happens. Alright, so let's move on to this week's news items. The first one is Aaron Eckhart will not return for Angel Has Fallen. Angel Has Fallen is, of course, the third film in the Olympus Has Fallen films. So Gerard Butler's so far the only returning star. The film will start filming apparently next year from the early reports that came out. Or from the first report that came out anyway. But yeah, Aaron Eckhart's not returning, so it looks like we'll follow a new president this time around. Matt Damon will appear in Ocean's 8. The film is a spin-off, of course, of Steven Soderbergh's films, Oceans 11, 12, and 13, and is directed by Gary Ross, who, of course, directed the first Hunger Games film. Oceans 8 will follow Sandra Bullock as Danny Ocean's sister, aka George Clooney's character from the original films, who leads a new group as they attempt to steal something from the Met Gala to frame someone else. The film has a pretty impressive cast. Cate Blanchett, Helena Bonham Carter, Anne Hathaway, Sarah Paulson, Minda Kaling, Rihanna, Awkwafina, and Dakota Fanning, who apparently joined, and I totally missed the fact that she had joined the project. They are currently filming right now in New York with a release date of June 8th, 2018. So Matt Damon's gonna appear in a cameo, which is pretty cool. I mean, you want that. It's a spin-off, so you know that they're eventually going to bring some characters in. Originally, they wanted George Clooney, but they said that they might save his cameo appearance for their second film, if a second film is made. So the next best step would probably be Matt Damon or even Brad Pitt, but again, we don't know. But it's still pretty cool. We'll see what happens with that. I'm actually excited for it, so maybe it's just me. Steve Carell is in talks to join the Minecraft movie. Variety broke the news that Steve Carell is in talks to join the video game adaptation of Minecraft, which it will now be called Minecraft the Movie. The film will be directed by Rob McElhenney. I think I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but his name, if you don't know the name, even though I mispronounced the last name, he is the creator of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He will also co-write the script with someone else. And the game doesn't really necessarily have a traditional kind of story, not in the other kind of sense of the word, like other video game movies. But whatever story they come up with should be interesting. Right now, it's of course being kept secret. We don't know too much about it. But of course, the Lego toys didn't have a story, and we got the Lego movie, and that was awesome. Of course, there's two different properties, but we'll see what happens with that. Either way, having Carell in your lineup isn't that bad of a thing. It gives the film some credence and doesn't help. I mean, people who aren't familiar with Minecraft, they see Steve Carell's name on there, and they're like, you know what? I like Steve Carell. I'll go watch Minecraft even though I know nothing about it. So Minecraft, the movie, currently does have a release date of May 25th, 2019. And if they keep moving the way they're going right now, they actually might make that date. Lin-Manuel Miranda is working on a secret project with Disney with the director of Zootopia. Of course, Lin-Manuel Miranda, his name is something that we're not going to be forgetting anytime soon because it keeps popping up. Not only is he responsible, of course, for the breakout smash hit Broadway show Hamilton, he also wrote and produced the music for the new Disney animated film Moana, which we'll talk about next week. He's also going to star in the sequel/reboot of Mary Poppins called Mary Poppins Returns, and he will work on the live-action film of The Little Mermaid. So why not add another project to the list? Miranda is continuing to work with Disney. He's now set to work on a secret animated film with the co-director of Zootopia, Brian Howard. Speaking with Variety, Miranda revealed that he's just begun developing the secret Disney movie while working with Disney while he was working on Moana. He told a story about him meeting John Lasseter, who is, of course, someone who works at Disney. He works more particularly with Pixar. He's actually one of the heads of Pixar. And he told him that you should meet up with Brian Howard, the director of Zootopia, and talk things out. And it looks like they are going to work together on this new secret project that I am sure is going to be amazing, because Brian Howard has had a great track record with Disney. He, of course, like I mentioned, he co-directed Zootopia. He also directed Tangled, which I thought was really good. I didn't think I'd like it, but I actually really enjoyed it. And Lin-Manuel Miranda is, of course, very talented himself, with all the success he's been having recently. So yeah, we're gonna get a secret project from those two very talented people. So it's gonna be I'm undoubtedly, I'm sure it's gonna be really good. A corduroy movie is in the works. Now, for those of you who don't know what corduroy is, he is essentially a child's story, because we can't just have Paddington and Curious George taking over the adorable animal characters now. So a corduroy movie is in the works over at CBS Films. Corduroy is, to many people, one of the most renowned children's books of all time. It's on the New York Public Library's 100 greatest children's book from the last 100 years, and it's also Parents Magazine's all-time best books for children. So this is a very highly respected book, and I remember reading Corduroy when I was younger. I don't remember too much of the story, but I instantly know the character when I saw the cover. So now CBS Films has announced they are developing an adaptation of the character. Not only that, they already have a director in Tim Story, who directed the Ride Along films. He directed Fantastic Four films. So the Think Like a Man films. He also directed the first Barbershop movie. So he's got a bit of a wild card, but he's directing the films. Now, for those who aren't familiar with or just forgot the story of Corduroy, it's pretty much it's a really simple story, but there was a lot that hit a lot of emotional peaks for a lot of people. It's about a teddy bear who goes on an adventure for a button around his department store after a woman refuses to buy him for her daughter because he's missing the button. And there's a lot more to the story. I don't want to give it away just in case you guys don't know what it is. But it's easy from that description. Of course, they could expand the story. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where they go from there. But yeah, they're making a corduroy movie. That's going to be interesting. The film is still, of course, in the early stages, so it might be a while before we hear anything production-wise. Marc Forster is going to direct the live-action Disney adaptation of Winnie the Pooh. Disney's live-action adaptation of Winnie the Pooh, titled Christopher Robin, has taken a step forward as they've gotten a director in Marc Forster. The film already has a script by Alex Ross Perry, who has written and directed films like Listen Up, Philip and Queen of Earth, and centers on Robin, the adult version of the boy from the books. And now Robin is all grown up and grown out of his imagination he had as a young boy, and is now a businessman who prioritizes his work over his wife and daughter. With his home life on the brink, the last thing in his life he needs is the return of Pooh, who needs his help to find his friends again. Robin has to find a way to help both sides or risk losing everything he holds dear. The film is also described as having a, quote, strong elements of magical realism as it seeks to tell an emotional journey that is combined with a heartwarming adventure. So the Winnie the Pooh movie, I don't know if we mentioned it here on the podcast, but they did announce it. I think it was like a couple months back. And the idea of Marc Forster directing Winnie the Pooh is an interesting choice. Let's put it that way. Forster is still kind of in, quote, film jail, if that's what you want to call it. His last few films haven't been that great. Machine Gun Preacher wasn't met with a lot of fanfare. World War Z, everyone knows the ton of production problems that film had, even though the final product wasn't that bad, at least for me. And then there was Quantum of Solace, although that wasn't his fault because it was going on during the writer's strike. in Hollywood. But a lot of his films have been kind of just haven't been met with a lot of fanfare. They're just okay movies. They're not as good as maybe people have imagined them to be. So having Marc Forster direct Winnie the Pooh is a rather interesting choice, considering how his last few films has gone out. Of course, Disney picked Forster for a good reason. They must have liked his vision, so we kind of have to trust in Disney a little bit that they got him involved. Not only that, Forster also directed a similar sounding movie in Finding Neverland, because the movies do sound pretty similar. So the idea of him essentially directing something similar to what he's already done is probably a good way to go, obviously with different characters and everything like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes out. No word yet when the film will go into production, but obviously Disney is looking forward to pushing this forward, considering they just hired a director and they already have a writer. The famed comic book Bone will get a film adaptation and has also landed a director. A feature film adaptation of the comic Bone has been kicking around Hollywood for years now, and now the project has taken a huge step forward, as it has landed a director in Marc Osborne. Now, Osborne is off directing the much talked about animated film The Little Prince, which you can watch on Netflix, by the way. And I've heard nothing but good things about it. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard nothing but great things. And he also directed the first Kung Fu Panda film as well. Osborne will co-write the script with Adam Klein, who is a new writer in Hollywood, with the goal of this being a possible trilogy. Now, the story of Bone, for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm not familiar, so I had to look this up as well, reveals around 3 cousins who are banned from their homeland of Boneville, only to find themselves mysteriously trapped in a wonderful, terrifying land where they come across a bevy of creatures. Again, I haven't read the comic. I didn't know too much about it. Apparently, this project's been in the works for years, since I think 2008 is when I read from this report. So it's been a while, and it looks like it's finally going to get made. And just based off the little research I did, I didn't want to learn too much about it from the covers and some of the panels on that I've been seeing online. It looks primed for a big screen adaptation. The visuals looked really cool, and I can only imagine with Marc Osborne. The Little Prince, by the way, I haven't seen it yet. Again, it's on Netflix. I've seen the trailer and I've seen a few pictures. That looks visually great too, so it should be interesting to see kind of where it goes from there. But I think they got a good director in hand for this. Of course, it's an animated film, so we probably won't hear things for a while, but it's out there just so you guys can know. The war drama Horse Soldiers puts together a pretty impressive cast. Now, while the title may sound like it's a period piece or a sequel to War Horse, it is not. The film is actually a film adaptation of the non-fiction novel by Doug Santon, which pits a small band of special forces soldiers against Taliban forces on the ground in Afghanistan after 9/11. The book explains how these brave men battled Taliban forces back into one of the stronghold cities, only to find themselves outnumbered by attackers posing as POWs. The film will be directed by first-time feature-length film director Nikolai Fugslig. It will be scripted by Peter Craig, who wrote the great film The Town. He's also had a hand in writing The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, and most recently wrote Bloodfather, which is a Mel Gibson on-demand, straight-to-DVD movie. And the great cast has just been announced. Deadline says the film will be led by Chris Hemsworth, Michael Shannon, Michael Pena, and newcomer who's still trying to make a name for himself, Austin Stowell. Of course, Hemsworth, we already know who he is, but he's still trying to make a name for himself outside of Thor. Shannon is, of course, always reliable in anything he does. If you don't know about Michael Shannon, I highly recommend you go watch a bunch of his movies. If you don't know him by name, most people will probably, a great deal of people will probably know him now as General Zod from Man of Steel. Michael Pena, of course, is finally getting the recognition he deserves because he's been a great actor, and his most recent string of films have been nothing but awesome. End of Watch, Fury, Ant-Man, he played Louise. So look out for that. And Stowell, he's still making a big name for himself. He's had a lot of small roles recently in some big movies like Whiplash and Bridge of Spies. So there is that. The film doesn't have a production date just yet, but with a cast like this and material that is not only a true story, but it sounds prime for a big screen adaptation, I'm sure we'll hear a lot more of this project in the coming months for sure. Holmes and Watson gets a supporting cast. A new Sherlock Holmes film was announced a few months back, and no, not the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes, the Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly version. That's right, Will Ferrell is set to play the famous detective Sherlock Holmes, while Reilly will play his partner Watson. The film will most likely be a comedy, because let's face it, it's Ferrell and Reilly, but the project has been slowly moving forward as of late, and now it looks like it's finally getting together its cast. Reports say that Rob Brydon, that's how you say his name, plays Scotland Yard Inspector Lestrade. Kelly MacDonald will play Holmes's housekeeper, Mrs. Hudson, and Rebecca Hall will play a character known as Dr. Grace Hart, described as the first female doctor to practice in London. Lauren Lapkus has already joined the film. I believe she joined earlier this week or late last week. I just forgot to mention it here on the podcast, but she has joined the film as Millie, who has a mind that, quote, gives Sherlock a run for his money, and as a result he becomes taken with her, somewhat obsessed. So it looks like she'll play somewhat of a love interest in the film. The cast itself is pretty solid. All of them have some comedic chops, although McDonald and Hall mostly like to stay with dramatic films, so it'll be nice change of pace for them and kind of see how they bounce off the rest of the cast. Brydon has mostly worked in the UK. He's done a lot of films in the UK, and he's done a few films here stateside that people might recognize him in. He was in Cinderella, and he was also in The Huntsman Winter's War. McDonald has done a lot of big projects like Trainspotting, Finding Neverland, Nanny McPhee, No Country for Old Men. She voiced Merida in Brave, but her biggest project here in the States was the HBO show Boardwalk Empire. I think it was HBO. If it wasn't HBO, it was Showtime. As for Hall, which is actually a personal favorite, she's a personal favorite of mine. She got her big start here stateside with The Prestige. Then she went on to do films like Frost Nixon, The Town, Iron Man 3, The Gift, and most recently she did a film called Christine, which was fantastic. And as for Lapkus, it seems like her name's gotten more into the mainstream recently. She appeared in Orange is the New Black. She also had a small role in Jurassic World. She plays one of the technicians in the park. So the cast is pretty solid. The film will be directed by Ian Cohen, who directed Get Hard, which also had Will Ferrell. He's also wrote films like Idiocracy, Tropic Thunder, Men in Black 3, and he also wrote Get Hard, which was actually his directorial debut. So this is pretty interesting. There's no word yet when the film will go in production, but they're already starting to cast, so I assume maybe sometime next year. It doesn't look that bad. I mean, the cast is pretty solid, and it'd be interesting to see kind of where this Sherlock Holmes and Watson kind of go. Jonah Hill and Leonardo DiCaprio's Atlanta Olympic bombing film finally gets a director. After being a great team in The Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio and Jonah Hill signed on to star in an adaptation of a Vanity Fair article called The Ballad of Richard Jewell. The article, and now the film, follows a security guard who Jonah Hill will play, who discovered the pipe bomb in the 1966 Olympics in Atlanta. When he moved the bomb to avoid massive damage, he was hailed a hero at first, but when the story in the Atlantic Journal-Constitution indicated that Jewell was being investigated by the FBI as a possible suspect, the media turned on him, pretty much ruining his reputation, even though he was cleared months later by the FBI having nothing to do with the bombing. DiCaprio will play a friend of his, a southern real estate attorney who helps to clear his name. Duo signed on this film back in 2014. It's been pretty quiet. Little small bits of news have been coming out. Paul Greengrass and Clint Eastwood were looked at by the studio to get this film off the ground. That, of course, didn't happen. The script was written by Billy Ray, who wrote The Great Captain Phillips, or the great film Captain Phillips, not The Great Captain Phillips. But he wrote the film Captain Phillips, and there's no word yet on if they'll still use that script or if they'll just start a new one and go off there. But it looks like we finally have a director in the film, and Ezra Edelman. Now, for those not familiar with the name, Edelman is actually the man responsible for the summer's hit miniseries documentary OJ Made in America, which made a lot of waves and a lot of people were talking about it. It was one of the shows that everyone was talking about in the summer, and this will actually be Edelman's first directorial feature film debut, if you don't count documentaries. But yeah, this sounds pretty exciting. I mean, obviously, again, Jonah Hill and Leonardo DiCaprio were a great team together in The Wolf of Wall Street. So seeing them again on the big screen working together is pretty cool. But also Jonah Hill taking the lead instead of Leonardo DiCaprio is also pretty cool. I mean, Jonah Hill is obviously kind of moving away. It seems like it is moving away from like these comedy films. He's becoming a great dramatic actor, and he's knocked it out of the park every time he's done a dramatic role. So I can't wait to see him tackle this real life person who was at first hailed a hero, but then turned into like this essentially loser. Cause that's what they made him look like in the media. They made him kind of like this loser, and there's a loner who probably put the pipe bomb there himself to make himself look like a hero. So his story is interesting. I actually don't. I wasn't even paying attention to the news at that time, but I don't remember. I never heard of Richard Jewell before, so it should be interesting to see kind of where this story goes off. And I mean, you got Leonardo DiCaprio and you got Jonah Hill leading the charge acting wise, and now you have Ezra Elderman but being the director of the film after he's made this great documentary about O.J. Simpson and kind of what the history was before O.J. and during and after, and what it's done to the not just the media but to the public. I think that's just a really great combination of things. So we'll see what happens with that. There's no word yet on when the film will go into production, but Hill and DiCaprio will also produce the film. So I'm pretty sure they want to move that forward now that they have a director. Fede Alvarez is officially signed on to direct the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo sequel, The Girl in the Spider's Web. But that's not all we're going to talk about Fede Alvarez, because Fede Alvarez, along with producer Sam Raimi, have mentioned that Don't Breathe 2 is in early development. Now, Don't Breathe was directed, of course, again by Fede Alvarez, and was a surprise hit back in August when it grossed over $89 million in its box office run off its $10 million budget. So that's a lot of money. Not only that, the film was met with some great critical acclaim, along with fan reception that was pretty solid. So the sequel didn't seem too out of the realm of possibility, but when he saw the film, it was like, probably don't need a sequel. But Alvarez and producer Sam Raimi if they wanted to, they could have gone that route, and that's exactly where they're going to go. Because during some interviews for the release of Don't Breathe on DVD and Blu-ray, they said they had their eye on the sequel. Speaking about the possible sequel, which isn't greenlit, by the way, so it's not official, it's just in early development. Alvarez said this: Don't Breathe 2 is something we definitely want to do. The challenge, obviously, is we just don't want to do the same movie over again, slap a 2 on it. We would feel so embarrassed if we do that. Our first reaction when they told us, do you want to do it, was no. That's Hollywood, that's the devil. We don't want to make a sequel just because we can. But then we got the idea that we're really excited about, and I won't tell you what it's about. It will spoil the whole thing. And then this is kind of the real newsworthy item here. Producer Sam Raimi, who was involved in this interview, dropped something pretty exciting, saying it's only the greatest idea for a sequel that I've ever heard of. I'm not kidding. Of course, he nor Alvarez didn't elaborate on what that idea was, but from the sounds of it and the looks of it from this interview that they were doing, it sounds like they're pretty excited for the potential sequel. So Alvarez made sure to say that they just started writing the script, and that he would love to direct, but he's not sure if he's going to direct. Of course, I just mentioned he's officially signed on to do The Girl in the Spider's Web. So it looks like maybe if they do a Don't Breathe 2, it will be after he directs and gets done with The Girl in the Spider's Web. Alvarez also went on to say he would love to see the blind man, played by Stephen Lang in the first film, come back to the big screen, and even Stephen Lang came out and said he would be really excited to come back as well. However, again, it should be noted that the film is not greenlit, so it's not official yet, so just be on the lookout for that. But I like Don't Breathe. I thought it was really good. It really surprised me, and it's a film that I didn't think there would be a sequel to, even though it made a crap ton of money. But I wouldn't be disappointed. I mean, Sam Raimi and Fede Alvarez seem to be really behind it. I highly doubt And he heard, Alvarez was like, I don't want to do another sequel just for the sake of doing one, but it looks like he has a really good idea for it, so I'm all game for it if they want to come back and do that. And sticking with this little duo here, Sam Raimi says the Last of Us movie is at a standstill. Now, back in 2014, Screen Gems announced they were developing a movie based off the popular and profitable video game The Last of Us. And then at Comic-Con that same year, there was news released. There was a bunch of news that came out from the game. It was released that the game's creative director and screenwriter, Neil Druckmann, I think that's how you say his name, would be a writer on the film. The film would have a different ending from the game. Naughty Dog, which is the studio behind the game, could have final say on the final cut of the film, which is a really big deal in Hollywood. They would have also final say on director and casting. And finally, that Game of Thrones actress Maisie Williams, aka Arya Stark, was eyed for the female lead of Ellie. But since then, the project has been pretty quiet. There's been literally no news from The Last of Us video game adaptation film. So first, for those who aren't familiar with the game, the story follows Joel, who is a survivor in a now post-apocalyptic world, who is tasked with protecting and escorting a teenage girl, Ellie, across this post-apocalyptic landscape, thinking that she has a cure, or is a key to a cure for a virus that has been infecting, of course, everyone since the outbreak happened. The game was met with a lot of critical acclaim and won a crap ton of awards and has a huge fan following. And fans just love this game. So it was a really big deal when the news came out that they were going to do a movie about it. So now Sam Raimi has spoken up about the project, saying the studio politics and creative differences, surprise, surprise, are the reason why the film has not been moving forward. Here's what he said. When we met with Neil with Ghost House Pictures, which is Sam Raimi's production company, we were hoping to get the rights like we do any project, and then we'd take it out and sell it, but we'd control the rights. With this one, he went to Sony, who I have a good relationship with. Of course, Sam Raimi did all the Spider-Man films for them, but they have their own plans for it. And I think Neil's plan for it, I'm not trying to be political, Neil's plan for it is not the same as Sony's. And because my company doesn't have the rights, I actually can't help him too much. Even though I'm one of the producers on it, the way he set it up, he sold the rights to Sony. Sony hired me as a producer by chance, and I can't get the rights free for him, so I'm not in the driver's seat, and I can't tell you what Sony and Neil together will decide on. If they do move forward, I would love to help them again. So there you go, and essentially pretty much, put the nail in the coffin, saying that they don't want to move forward. It's not my place to say why, and Neil and I think it is in a slight disagreement with them about how things should go, so there's a standstill, and I don't have the power to move it. So the project is pretty much at a standstill, maybe dead at this point, since Sony and Neil Druckmann have pretty much come to a standstill over creative differences, which is again something that's been happening a lot in Hollywood recently. But yeah, I haven't played the games yet, or the game I should say. There's only one game. There was a DLC release, but there's only one game. I haven't played the game yet. I know some of the story. I know a lot of people that have played it, and they all agree that it is fantastic. And the idea for a movie of a game that already looks cinematic does seem odd, but it is Hollywood after all. I've seen people play it, and I've seen stuff online for it, and it does kind of feel again like there should be something based off it, but I don't know. I mean, I haven't played the games, and I think fans are okay that they're not making or that the movie is at a standstill right now, so they're not essentially making a Last of Us film at the moment. But it should be interesting to see kind of where things go from here. Stranger things have happened, but from the sounds of it, it does sound like maybe we won't be getting a Last of Us movie anytime soon. It looks like the Green Hornet is getting another chance on the big screen, as reports say that Paramount Pictures are doing a brand new Green Hornet film with director Gavin O'Connor, who of course directed The Accountant earlier this year and directed the very underappreciated Warrior with Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton. If you have not seen Warrior, I highly recommend you do. It is, again, it's a very underappreciated film that I think you'll highly enjoy. The Accountant also very good, But yeah, having Gavin O'Connor on this is really cool. He's going to direct the film. Now, the idea is to put a serious twist on the character, re-envisioning the main character, Britt Reed, as a, quote, edgier protagonist capable of being the catalyst for a new franchise. The film will be written by newcomer Sean O'Keefe, who will work with O'Connor to develop the film, which O'Connor will also produce because he bought the rights to make a Green Hornet film because he has been a fan of the Green Hornet for a while, and this is a project that he's been wanting to do ever since he became a director. So speaking with Deadline, O'Connor teased his new vision for the character, saying, "My intention is to bring gravitas to the Green Hornet that wipes away the camp of the previous iteration. I want to re-mythologize the Green Hornet in a contemporary context with emphasis on the story and character while at the same time incorporating themes that speak to my heart. The comic book movie is a genre of our time. How do we look at it differently? How do we create a distinctive film experience that tells itself differently than other comic book movies? How do we land comfortably, I can't say the word, at the divide between art and industry? How do we go deeper, prompt more emotion? How do we put a beating heart into a character that was never done before? These are my concerns. These are my desires, my intentions, my fears, and my goals." Now, the previous iteration he was talking about was back in 2011 with a film starring Seth Rogen, which he starred in as the Green Hornet, and even co-wrote the film with his regular co-writer and contributor Evan Goldberg as an action comedy. And the film wasn't met with a ton of fanfare. It doesn't even, but it does have his fans. I wasn't a huge fan of the film. I saw what that they were trying to do with the action comedy stuff, but I don't know. I just wasn't a huge fan of it. It had its moments, but for me, it wasn't as great as I thought it should have been or could have been. There's been a lot of Green Hornet films, but since he mentioned the past iteration, which happened to be Seth Rogen's film, that's the one we're talking about. So there has been a lot of Green Hornet films in the past. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, Green Hornet, he started off as a radio show character like the Lone Ranger, and then he moved on to the comic books and eventually got his own TV show in the 60s that actually starred Bruce Lee. So that was pretty cool. The character is Britt Reed. He's a wealthy newspaper publisher who moonlights as a masked crime-fighting vigilante with the help of his loyal partner and driver, Kato. So there are a lot of similarities to him and kind of like Batman a little bit. But when it comes to the character, what Gavin O'Connor wants to do with his Green Hornet, and this is how he kind of describes him a little bit. He says he's Batman upside down meets Bourne, talking about Jason Bourne, inside out by the way of American sniper hero Chris Kyle. So that's the Green Hornet. But when it comes to Britt Reed, he kind of calls him the anti-Bruce Wayne, who's struggling with uncovering and accepting the truth about his father, who was actually the original Green Hornet. So you kind of get the idea where kind of O'Connor is coming from. And O'Connor also wants to make Britt's background a military one, with the character having served in something akin to the CIA Special Activities Division as opposed to SEAL Team 6. So he's going to know how to fight. And that was one of the things that Seth Rogen's character didn't really know how to do in the last film. He learned to fight from Kato, played by Jay Chow, I believe, in that film. So it should be interesting to see kind of where they go with this. When it comes to O'Connor, he's a great director. I mentioned Warrior and I mentioned The Accountant. He also did the movie Miracle, which is about the Olympic hockey team. So and he's done okay films like Pride and Glory, which had I believe it was Colin Farrell and Joaquin Phoenix. That was pretty okay. Jane Got a Gun was the last film he directed with Natalie Portman, Joe Edgerton, Ewan McGregor in there. And that wasn't really, the movie was okay, but it wasn't really his fault because that movie was kind of already falling apart, so you can't really blame that on him. But O'Connor's exciting choice. Everything he does and he really loves and puts his heart and soul into turn out to be great. So I can't wait to see what he does with the Green Hornet, especially considering that he is a huge fan of the character. So I can only imagine he's going to treat the character with respect and making Green Hornet back kind of this more kind of gritty, kind of super, not gritty, he didn't use the word gritty, but kind of bringing it back to a more serious tone. Sounds pretty cool. I mean, again, we have to wait to see what will happen, but you got a name like O'Connor. I mean, that just brings now gravitas to people who know who he is. Like, Kevin O'Connor isn't a household name yet, which is kind of a shame, but he is one of those great directors that anytime you see him attached to, whether it be a short list or in talks with directing, you kind of wish he gets it, because he is one of those great directors out there. And I can't wait to see what he does with the Green Hornet. There's no word yet on when the project would go into production, but I'm sure we'll hear about that soon. Relativity Media is planning sequels for The November Man, Earth to Echo, Act of Valor, and Immortals. Now, Relativity Media is getting a bit ambitious, put it that way, since they returned back to business after filing for bankruptcy earlier this year. But now the studio has announced a partnership with a new studio called Storyoscopic, with the aim to make, quote, family films and branded features with global appeal, with a budget around $15 to $50 million in the range. Now, with the new studio able to finance their films, they have announced that they will be doing 5 projects together that all happen to be sequels. Screen Daily says the studios will do sequels for November Man, Earth to Echo, Act of Valor, and Immortals, with the last film being Relativity's biggest and most profitable film before they went belly up. The same can be said for Earth to Echo, although they didn't get as much attention as Immortals did. The idea of sequels isn't really surprising, especially if they go the low budget route. Earth to Echo apparently left the film open for a sequel. I never watched it. I wasn't really interested in watching it. I heard some very little good things about Earth to Echo. Act of Valor had sequel talks when it was released. Act of Valor, by the way, don't remember what Act of Valor, that was the movie that had a lot of first-person views. It wasn't a POV movie, but there was a lot of POV shots during the action stuff that made it feel like a video game. There have been sequel talks for that when the film came out, and it looks like the sequel will probably follow a SWAT team from the early reports. Who knows, and they might change that. But that was back in 2013. So there is that. November Man was the spy film with Pierce Brosnan, and that had a really small opening despite its wide release, and it was, again, that was met with a lot of mixed reviews. And Immortals, the last film, was probably one of the bigger films, was the closest to getting a sequel, even back in 2015. So it was last year. The old Relativity Media CEO said the script was almost ready, and that Henry Cavill, yes, Superman Henry Cavill, was set to return. Of course, nothing has happened since then. Now, really, Relativity Media getting back in the game, that's good for them. Again, they filed for bankruptcy, but they probably shouldn't rely too much on brand names to get them back on the plus side of things, especially since I don't know if a lot of people want sequels to all these movies, and even if they did want sequels, it's been a while since a lot of people have probably heard of these movies. So I don't know. Although I wouldn't mind seeing a sequel to Immortals. Again, I wouldn't have minded if, it came out earlier than that. And Immortals, of course, gave us, again, a pre-Superman Henry Cavill. They gave us Luke Evans, and it was done by the visionary director Tarsem Singh. There's a lot of great visuals in that movie, and I think it was really cool. So I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing a sequel to it, but again, it's been a while since a lot of these films have come out. So I don't know if sequels to all these movies are a good idea, but good on Relativity Media for trying to get back in the game, and now they have a studio that's able to finance or help finance their films. Be good for them. And speaking of Relativity, this is something. It's like every time I say I'm not going to talk about this project anymore, I end up talking about it. The Crow reboot. So the Crow reboot, which apparently is now titled The Crow Reborn, has now left Relativity Media after being stuck in developmental hell for so long. The film has now been picked up by Davis Films. They have been a production company for films like pretty much all the Resident Evil films, the Silent Hill movie, and most recently they were a production company on Mechanic Resurrection. It's also been picked up by 2 other companies, Highland Film Group and Electric Shadow. They have acquired the rights to produce and distribute the film, so keeping pretty much the Crow reboot alive. Now, scheduling for the film is still up in the air at the moment, but according to a source close to the project, or at least familiar with the project, the studios reportedly hope to maintain the same pace that the film was on before they bought the rights to it. If that is the case, then the film could start shooting in January, although I imagine now moving studios, they'll probably push that start date back just a little bit. The film will still be directed by Corin Hardy, who directed a film called The Hollow. He's staying on as a director. However, it's unclear so far as the time of this recording if Jason Momoa will stay on board, since he was in serious talks to join the project as the lead a few months ago. And again, there's a report that in the report for this, it says that the casting will either be made official or non-official soon. That's kind of the wording they used. The official announcement was going to happen soon, whether Momoa was still a part of the film. So yeah, I mean, I guess the Crow remake is still alive, and I think I've mentioned this in the past. I would not believe that a Crow movie is going to happen unless I see a trailer, and unless I see it with my own two eyes on the big screen, or in my TV at home on Netflix. I won't believe it. I won't. But this news, however, does add another layer of problems for the project. Again, I mentioned earlier that with the new move, they might have to change the start date for production, for filming. And that's not the only problem, though. The other problem is that they have to work on different schedules, on new contracts, on a new budget, and everything in between. Also, after all this, moving from one studio to another studio, but also being stuck in developmental hell for so long, all the false starts, all the lead actors that have been attached and have dropped out, all the directors that have been attached and dropped out, this movie has to be good. It cannot be decent, it cannot be okay, it has to be good, if not great. Because after all of this, after moving studios, after so many people have come in and dropped out, it has to be good. It just has to, because all of that, if it turns out to be shit, it won't be worth it. It won't. And it won't help if Momoa is added to the list of growing actors who have been attached at one point and drop out. It won't help. So The Crow, it does help a little bit maybe that the film will go closer to the original graphic novel series that of course was created by James O'Barr, but it at this point it just has to be good. It does, because if it sucks and everyone's waited so long for a film that no one ever wanted, then what was the point? So it'd be interesting to see kind of where this goes with this. I won't believe it until I see a poster, until I see a trailer, until I see it with my own two eyes. So there's that. Roland Emmerich says the Stargate reboot has fallen apart. Now, earlier this year, it was announced that a new Stargate film will be getting made with the intent, of course, of starting a new trilogy, with Roland Emmerich and writer-producer Dean Delvin returning to help. However, the project has been pretty quiet since it was first announced, and there's a reason for that, because now Emmerich has revealed that the Stargate reboot has suffered a major setback, saying it looked good for a couple months, but now it's looking not so good. There are just a lot of things that have to fire at the same time, and there was a moment where I thought it was all firing at the same time, and then it all kind of fell apart. Emmerich went on to say, "It's one of the reasons I prefer to work independently. Listen, I think we did Stargate right. The fans would like it, and we could do something really good. But if we screw it up, they'll reject it, as they should. But I kind of don't want to do it if I think that we'll screw it up, and that's one of the things that's holding us back." So, obviously the big one here is that the Stargate reboot is no longer happening. However, on the other hand, and even though I agree and I like Emmerich's comments saying that, if everything's not going right, we're not going to do it because we don't want to mess it up, this is coming from the same man that gave us Independence Day Resurgence. So we're not really, it's not that those comments kind of lessen the blow. Well, not lessen the blow, but are kind of, taken down a notch when you realize that he gave us Independence Day Resurgence. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to think that the failure of Resurgence at the box office is one of the reasons why the Stargate movie isn't happening, because it looked like the idea was that Emmerich was going to return to direct, and he was going to be involved in the project either way, even if he wasn't going to come back to direct. So, would it have been cool to see another Stargate movie? Probably, yeah, sure. But at the same time, we got to realize that this is Roland Emmerich. This is a guy that gave us Independence Day Resurgence and imagined doing another one, which it doesn't look like they're going to do another Independence Day, which I'm kind of happy that they're not, because the last one wasn't really that good. But when it comes to Stargate, would it have been cool to see another movie? Yeah, sure, it would have been cool to see another Stargate movie. The Stargate franchise, the TV shows were phenomenal. The Stargate TV movies were great. But I don't know. I think I'm kind of okay there's not another Stargate movie happening, even though I would have been interested in seeing how they would have taken it. But there you go, no more Stargate for us in the future, at least for the time being. Finally, the last news item of the day, Ryan Reynolds comments on Tim Miller leaving Deadpool 2. Ryan Reynolds has finally opened up, sort of. Let's put quotation marks around, open up. On the former director of Deadpool 2, Tim Miller, Reynolds was interviewed by GQ and said this originally. At first, all I can really add is that I'm sad to see him off the film. Tim's brilliant, and nobody worked harder on Deadpool than he did. Now, if you remember, Tim Miller left on good terms with the studio despite the creative differences that were reported. One of them being with Ryan Reynolds himself. However, his later comments on the interview gave us a little peek behind the curtain. Reynolds talked about the process of greenlighting and even mentions some of the drama behind the scenes, saying making the movie was very, very difficult. It was the most passionate group of individuals I ever worked with in my life, and for whatever reason, that crazy group of people is what made the thing work so well. Not just because I had this vision and I saw it this way, it had to be this way. It worked because we all had that feeling. But there was vaguely scary fights in post-production process that escalated quickly. Luckily, everybody's grown up and at the end of the day loves each other. He went on to expand the last bit a little bit, saying, I know I need to exert control. I know when I need to let go of it. I'm not going to go and sit with Tim Miller and say the visual effects of Deadpool need to be done this way. The man is a visual effects wizard, but there are character and tone things that I know really well, and I've also been with this thing the longest out of anybody, aside from the guys that wrote the comics. 11 years I've been trying to get this Sisyphus rock up the hill, and it kept rolling back on top of me. So I'm going to be all the fuck over it for the moment it starts to the moment it finishes. Now, it's true. Reynolds has been with the character for a while now. He was trying to get a Deadpool movie made for a long time, even before his appearance in X-Men Origins Wolverine. And even when it was announced that the character potentially could appear in that film, Reynolds fought for that role for a long time. So he's a producer on the film, on Deadpool, and of course now Deadpool 2 and the recently announced Deadpool 3. So he's obviously going to know this character very well, and he's obviously going to try to make the character as great as possible. So that's no surprise there, really. His comment, though, that there were vaguely scary fights in post-production, again, line up to the things that we've heard in other news reports. So I don't know. I mean, it's sad to see. It was sad to see Tim Miller go, but at the same time, we have to understand that, like Ryan Reynolds said, making a movie is hard. Making any movie is hard. And essentially making Deadpool movie is hard too, because this is a movie that people have been wanting for a while. This is a movie that Ryan Reynolds has tried to make for a while. And it wasn't until they released the quote leaked footage of what they can do with Deadpool, when the reception with that was very high, everyone was like, we gotta make this movie immediately. So Fox jumped on and they're like, here's your budget, here's what you guys need, and here you go wild. So it's nice to hear Ryan Reynolds finally come out. Obviously people have been probably asking him and eventually he was going to have to answer these questions, and it's nice of him to kind of put this out there. And again, Tim Miller left on good terms. That's what was said. He left on good terms. So you can't really go too much. I mean, you could go into his comments a lot. I'm not going to go into his comments a lot because they sound pretty straightforward. I mean, the vaguely scary fights, I would like to know what those vaguely scary fights were, but obviously it led to creative differences between him and Tim Miller. So I don't know. I think it's great that he finally came out and said something. So we'll see what happens with the rest of it. We'll see. They're still deciding who they're going to bring in as a new director. They're going to start filming sometime next year. I think February or March. Right? Maybe I think that was the word. I know a lot of people said like, oh, they're going to film in January. That wasn't the case. It might be February or March when they start filming. But we'll see what happens to that. I mean, there's not. I don't know. Again, there's not a lot to really go into. I mean, he pretty much straightforward said, yes, there were fights behind the scenes. So, all right. So let's move on to trailer talk. We had a lot of trailers dropped this week. I won't talk about all of them, but they'll be all linked down below. There's a new trailer from Monster Trucks. The first trailer for the Jessica Chastain-led film The Zookeeper's Wife was actually based off a true story during World War II. That looks phenomenal. It looks like a really great, powerful drama film. That comes out next year in March, which I'm very surprised because that looks primed for an Oscar during Oscar season, but it's coming out in March, so I'm not going to complain. I'm going to go watch it. I love Jessica Chastain, so I'm gonna go watch that. A new trailer for Natalie Portman's led Jackie came out. That also looks very powerful. This is getting a lot of buzz. It comes out in a few weeks, so obviously we'll talk about it then, but this film looks extremely powerful. She's playing Jackie Kennedy during the assassination of her husband, President John Kennedy. So John F. Kennedy. So it looks very powerful. I can't wait to see what this movie or how this movie plays out because it's been getting a lot of great reviews. There's a new trailer for the Boston Marathon bombing film Patriots Day that looks powerful as well. Peter Berg teams up with Mark Wahlberg once again for a true life story. They did great work with Deepwater Horizon, so I can only imagine they're going to do great work with the Boston Marathon bombing. That of course shake everyone. It just wasn't Boston, it was everyone. So can't wait to see that. There's a new trailer for the live action adaptation of Beauty and the Beast. It looks phenomenal. The production design on this film looks amazing. The CGI in this film looks amazing. I can't wait to watch it. Emma Watson is playing, of course, Belle. Dan Stevens is playing the Beast. The makeup on the Beast looks pretty cool. I'm sure it's a mixture of practical effects and CGI, but it looks pretty cool. Luke Evans is playing Gaston. It looks really good. I'm not gonna lie, it looks really, really good. So I can't wait to watch that next year. The first trailer for Ghost in the Shell came out. Talked about Scarlett Johansson. She's playing the Major. Visually, the film looks phenomenal. It looks great. How it's gonna turn out story-wise, that's another story. That's a whole another thing. I had a friend of mine who we heard about, who you guys have heard on the podcast. He's the one that talked about the little teasers they put out. I had a friend of mine. He talked about the Ghost in the Shell adaptation this week. And he said he's still worried about the movie based off the trailer. The trailer doesn't really go too much into the story. They do bring up one little tidbit at the end that just it made it sound like kind of not cliche. I don't want to say cliche, but it makes it sound like, oh, okay, I guess that's gonna be a thing. Visually, the movie looks good. It's the first trailer. They're gonna sell you on the action, of course. I'm pretty sure the next trailer will have a lot more stories, so we'll figure it out. Visually, the film looks great, put it that way. But the new trailer for Kong Skull Island came out, and it is, I already swore on the podcast, so I'm going to swear again, it's fucking awesome. I love this trailer. I thought it was so great. You see King Kong in all his glory. You see a lot more of the cast. You see the villains in the movie, which are called the Skull Crushers. I think I'm pronouncing that. If I remember that correctly, they're called Skull Crushers. It looks really, really good. There's some tonal changes in the movie. It goes from like war drama to horror to action to comedy. So there's a lot of tonal shifts in the movie, which I'm sure will be more smoothly done in the film. But it looks awesome. I saw it twice in a row, so I'm gonna watch it again after I'm done recording this podcast, because it's really, really good. It's a really good trailer. It has me more hyped up for the film than I already was. So I can't wait to see what they bring out for this. All right, so let's move on to this week's releases. We have one expanded release this week, which is the Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, which we talked about last week on the podcast. It's the new Ang Lee movie that's based off the book that tells a story of a group of soldiers who come home and through flashbacks they're remembering their time at war when they're being honored at a football game. So that's getting an expanded release this week. Next limited release that's the expansion release. The limited releases this week, the first one is The Take, which was originally called Bastille Day, which is about a young con artist played by Richard Madden, who was on Game of Thrones. He played Robb Stark, and former CIA agent played by Idris Elba in the film, embark on an anti-terrorist mission in France. This was originally supposed to come out like months ago, and finally came out I think overseas like a couple months ago. It was called Bastille Day. It's obviously it was based off the day. Bastille Day is a very important day in France, and of course they postponed it because of the attacks during Bastille Day earlier this year. But that's finally coming out. The next limited release is Nocturnal Animals, which is based on a novel by Austin Wright called Tony and Susan. The film follows an art gallery owner played by Amy Adams, haunted by her ex-husband's novel played by Jake Gyllenhaal, a violent thriller that she interprets as a veiled threat and a symbolic revenge tale. The film has, again, a star-studded cast besides Amy Adams and Jake Gyllenhaal. It also stars Michael Shannon, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Ilsa Fisher, Armie Hammer, Laura Linney, and Michael Sheen. The film looks great. It looks really awesome. It looks like a really intense thriller / drama that I can't wait to watch. Again, it's got this great cast, and I obviously can't wait to watch Nocturnal Animals. It's getting a limited release this week, but it's going to be rolling out in the weeks to come. So if you don't see it in your theaters this week, just wait for the next week or the week after. I think it gets in a wide release few weeks. So if you can't wait for that, then if you can't see it this week, then wait for a few weeks where it'll be everywhere. The next limited release, which will also be getting a whiteout release in the coming weeks, is Manchester by the Sea. It follows an uncle played by Casey Affleck who is forced to take care of his teenage nephew after the boy's father dies. This film has been getting a ton of great reviews from the film festival circuit. It's already getting a push for Best Picture Oscar. Casey Affleck is already getting early nominations for Best Actor. Michelle Williams, who also stars in the film, she's been getting Best Supporting Actor or Best Supporting Actress nominations already. So yeah, it's one of those films that everyone says you should watch. It's been getting nothing but great reviews. I've heard nothing but great things about it. So Manchester by the Sea, again, if you can't see it this week, it's been getting rolled out in the weeks to come. So look forward to that as well. All right, so let's get to this week's wide releases. The first wide release this week is Bleed for This. It is the inspirational story of former world boxing champion played by Miles Teller, who after a neo-fatal crash, which left him not knowing if he ever walk again, made one of the sport's most incredible comebacks. The film also stars Katey Siegel, Aaron Eckhart, Ciarán Hinds, and Ted Levine. It's been getting some decent reviews. The film hasn't been really jumping out at me too much, but this last push they've been doing for TV promotions has gotten me a little bit hooked. So I kind of want to go watch it now. But it should be interesting to see kind of where this thing goes. So Bleed for This is out. The next wide release is Edge of 17. High school life gets even more unbearable for Nadine, played by Haley Steinfeld, when her best friend Krista, played by Haley Lou Richardson, starts dating her older brother, played by Blake Jenner. The film also stars Kira Sedgwick and Woody Harrelson. It is a new coming-of-age film. I was instantly hooked the first time I watched this trailer. The chemistry between Steinfeld and Woody Harrelson in the trailer alone made me want to go watch this movie. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's a coming of age movie. Obviously not really targeted toward me. It's a coming of age story about a girl, but I'm obviously not a girl, but it still looks like a really great film, and I'm really interested in going to go watch it this week. So, Edge of 17, your second wide release this week, the third wide release this week, and the final one, which I'm sure many of you probably know by now: Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. The adventures of writer Newt Scamander, played by Eddie Redmayne, in New York's secret community of witches and wizards 70 years before the events of Harry Potter. When he comes to America, his suitcase filled of fantastic beasts accidentally gets opened, and now he's on a hunt to gather all his fantastic beasts. The film also stars Kathleen Waterston, Dan Fogel, Colin Farrell, Ezra Miller, Samantha Morton, Ron Perlman, John Voight, amongst others. It's been getting some pretty decent reviews. Just saying, it's been getting some great reviews. Obviously, it doesn't really matter because Harry Potter fans are going to go watch it anyway. Don't really care. They don't really care if it gets bad reviews. They're going to go watch it. So, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I'm not the biggest Potterhead out there. I don't know too much about the history and the lore behind stuff. But I know there's a lot of people out there that are very big Harry Potter fans. Some of the early word of mouth from people that I YouTubers and reporters who are very big Potterheads. They've been saying nothing but great things about the film. So it should be interesting to see. But again, they're Harry Potter fans, so who knows? So I am going to go watch it. I'm going in a little bit more at a kind of neutral ground. So I do like the Harry Potter films, but again, I'm not the biggest Harry Potter fan out there, like a lot of other people that are probably gonna go watch this. But it should be interesting to see. I'm not gonna lie. I am interested in seeing kind of where this kind of lands and how good it is. So we'll see what happens with that. So Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Edge of 17, and Bleed for This are your wide releases this week. Getting an expanded release this week is Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, and your limited releases are The Take, Manchester by the Sea, and Nocturnal Animals. Now this will be the part where I do the box office predictions. However, I will not be doing box office predictions this week because next week is a special podcast. Next week I will be answering your questions. Next week is a different podcast. You guys will see it is a podcast of answering some people's questions that they've been sending in, and also talking about the movies that are coming out next week. So next week's podcast is going to be rather just kind of out there. It's not going to be a normal podcast because it's the Thanksgiving week, and I'm going to be quite busy with family stuff. So next week's podcast is actually being recorded a little bit after this one. So there's that. So there's going to be no box office predictions. However, I was wrong on the box office. I will mention that. My picks last week were Arrival at number 1, Doctor Strange at number 2, Trolls at number 3, Hacksaw Ridge at number 4, and Almost Christmas at number 5. The box office was actually Doctor Strange, which I said I was okay if Doctor Strange took the top, and I even said that I think it was going to take the top, but I picked Arrival anyway, which, by the way, if you haven't seen Arrival, you really should. It is so awesome. It is so great. It had me just hooked. It takes a while for it to really kind of kick in, but when it does, it's so good. That last act of the film is just so powerful and just greatly written, and just it's impressive. Go watch Arrival. So last week's box office, Doctor Strange was number 1, Trolls was number 2, Arrival was number 3, Almost Christmas was number 4, and Hacksaw Ridge was number 5. I also saw Hacksaw Ridge, which I thought was fantastic. Andrew Garfield is amazing in that film. Highly recommend you go watch it as well. So yeah, I'm not doing box office predictions because next week's podcast is going to be a little different, and obviously I won't know the box office at that point because I'm recording next week's podcast a little bit after this because of the holiday week. So yeah. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you guys. So that's pretty much it for this podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. If you're listening and you want to ask me questions, send them in anyway. Send them in the comment section. I will take the time for the podcast 2 weeks to answer those questions if you want to ask away, or just save those questions for another time, sometime later on the podcast. So if you want to send me in questions, feel free, whether in the comment section or on the Facebook page at facebook.com/moviepit. That's facebook.com/moviepit. Link, a clickable link, will be down below in the description/show notes area. While you're down there, you can also go to my WordPress account, which is where I put all my written reviews. You can go check out my written review for Hacksaw Ridge and Arrival, along with all the other movies that I watch over the weekend, so you guys can go check that out. That is movieswithchris.wordpress.com, movieswithchris.wordpress.com. Again, a clickable link will be down below in the description/show notes area. Also, while you're down there in the description/show notes area, you can also go click on all the trailer links. Those will all be down there. You can also click down there for the timestamp. So if there's a certain story you want to hear again, just click on that timestamp and it will take you right back to the story. Also, there's an interview with Paul Verhoeven about the Starship Troopers reboot. He also talks a little bit about his past movies getting remade. There's it's a pretty cool little story. I put the link down there because there was just a lot of stuff to unpack, and I just thought it'd be better if you guys read that for yourselves. So there's a link for that interview down there as well. So thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. There will be a special podcast next week, not a usual podcast like this one next week. But just in case, for whatever reason, don't listen next week, because of course you'll be with your families. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week, and I hope you guys have a very special Thanksgiving. Hopefully you guys get so full you can barely move. It's going to be great, I'm sure. Enjoy your time. Be thankful for everything that you have, and try to be thankful for the family you have around. You know, you may hate them sometimes, but they're still your family. So yeah, if you don't listen to the podcast next week, happy Thanksgiving. Or if you're not celebrating Thanksgiving or not going to be with your loved ones, happy Thursday or happy Friday whenever you listen to this podcast, or whenever you listen to the podcast next week too. It's just, yeah. So we'll do that. All right. So thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I will see you guys next time, and let me know down below what your favorite news item of the week was. Anything else that just tickles your fancy. Just put it that way. That sounded weird. Thank you guys so much. I'm Christian. This is the Movie Pit Podcast. Be safe this weekend. Have some fun. And of course, go watch some movies.